I'll tell them a story first, and you think then of something else.
It's a nice father.
I'm going to stand up when I tell you this, so I want the girls to hear it.
He's talking to the girls tonight.
Father like son.
My most memorable experience with the Rebbe, Mrs. Berenson. Mrs. Berenson, yes, you heard this story from me 40 years ago, if you were at the luncheon with your husband. And my immediate family knows the story, but I'll tell you the story. I was living in Sydney, and I remember at the time I had my sons. I had two daughters and two sons at the time, and I was a half a day in business with my father-in-law, who was a diamond merchant, a jeweler. And the other half a day I used to occupy myself with teaching and so forth. There was a city called Adelaide.
It still exists.
Still exists. For me, it's a city from the past. I wasn't an official rabbi at that time, although I did officiate as a rabbi in a place called the Mizrahi Synagogue in Sydney. Apparently they had a minister there, I don't know if he was a rabbi or not, and the community had a row with him, and either they gave him the sack or he left. I don't know exactly what happened, but they were left without a minister, without a rabbi. And apparently Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur was coming, and normal for a congregation to think that you need a rabbi during the high holidays. And apparently they wrote to Rabbi Porosh, may God rest his soul, he's now passed on, and they wrote to him that they need a minister for Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur. Could he please recommend someone? Well, this was 3 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, and there wasn't very much time, and every rabbi had already been engaged and so forth. And he wrote to them, it's very hard, but there is a Rabbi Gutnik in Sydney, Rabbi Chaim Gutnik. If you get him, they say you'll have a nice holiday. So they wrote me a letter. I think they offered me £300, apart from the salary, wages, from the fare money and so forth. I should come. I talked it over with my wife. As I said, I had children at that time, and I decided against it. And I answered them straight away, no, I didn't want to leave my wife and family yontif and go by myself. So Rabbi Porosh wrote to them, he said, listen, the only one way to get him, there's a rabbi in New York called the Rebbe. You write to him that you need him, and he will instruct him, and once he tells him there's no. They did that, and a week before Rosh Hashanah, I get a letter. The Rebbe says, I was shocked to hear that the community turned to you to help them out on Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur, and you refuse them. What sort of a business is that? And in the question that he asked, the assumption was that I'm going to go. And he wrote at the end, he says, when you get there, will you interest yourself, please, in the Egyptian Jews that are there? Find out what's doing with the Egyptian Jews. I didn't know what kind of Jews there were in Adelaide. And if the Rebbe wrote, I took 2 cases with me. In one case, I didn't wear a hat and a suit at that time. I didn't have a beard. And I walked around like any other Australian young fellow did. So what I did, I went out and bought myself a black hat and a black suit. I had to look the part a little bit. I couldn't grow a beard that quickly. And my wife packed me up 2 cases. In one case was chicken, cooked chicken, matzah and so that I should have kosher food. And in the other case were my clothes, and I landed at the airport. And Mr. Gus Hines is not alive today, Mr. Gus Hines and the Mr. Solomon. And you have a family Krasenstein here. A relative of theirs was on the board. They came to see me, meet me at the airport. As soon as the president, who was Mr. Gus Hines, saw me, I saw the disappointment in his face. I didn't look like a rabbi at all. I looked like some young boy coming in. Anyway, they took me to a motel, and we had a bit of a discussion, we had a bit of an argument, because he started dictating me what I should do, what I shouldn't do, what I should say, what I shouldn't. I said, listen, you called a rabbi. A rabbi's supposed to tell you what to do, not you tell him what to do. But there was one thing I agreed. They wanted that at the end of the service, that when the service finishes and I'm sitting on the top there, something on a rabbi's chair, that I should go down after the service and stand by the door, so that all the congregation, when they leave the congregation, should be able to pass by and get my blessing for a happy new year. Okay, I said, right. This was on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, the day before. On the eve of Rosh Hashanah, I walked out of my hotel and walked to the synagogue to have a look and see what was doing there. I wanted to test my voice, how my voice was carrying the shul, to see what the shul was like. And as I was wandering around there in the corridor, there was a girl working in the office. She was a secretary, a lady. And as I was walking around inside the shul and outside the shul, I suddenly noticed that an elderly woman walked into the synagogue, and she was leading a young girl, about 17, a plumpish girl, leading her by her hand into the synagogue, into the corridor, into the foyer. And she stopped to me and asked me, excuse me, sir, could you tell me please, where is the holiest place in the synagogue? For a minute there, I didn't know what it meant, the holiest place in the synagogue. Probably where the women sit. But then I thought to myself, probably where the curtain is set, where the Sifra Torah. So I took her, and she led the girl, and I noticed that she led the girl was blind. And she led the girl to the synagogue. I told her, you see where that red curtain is? That's the holiest part of the synagogue. And I saw her take the girl, lead her up to the curtain, and then walk out again. And I was standing fascinated. And I thought to myself, my God, what a community this is. They come privately to the synagogue before Rosh Hashanah to confess their sins before God and get forgiveness. And I saw the young girl fall on her knees, pick up the curtain, and start kissing it. I couldn't see what she was saying or anything like that, but it was a very tremendous sight. And as she was there, I thought to myself, I'll find out what this is. So I walked back and went into the office to the lady, and I asked her, listen, tell me, there's a blind girl there, kneeling in front of the Aron, where the Sifra Torah, and praying. Can you tell, well, what is this? So she says, is she dark? I said, yes. She looks like from the east. So she said to me, oh, I know what it is. Don't worry about it, she says. There are some Egyptian Jews here. We don't get on very well with them. And she's probably one of them. They don't come to the synagogue, most of them. And probably she wanted to daven, say something before Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so I thought I'd go out there and wish the young girl a Happy New Year. But by the time I'd finished talking to the lady and I went out, the girl was gone and nobody was there. I came into the synagogue. I remember I preached there. And then on the first day I went down and stood by the entrance to the synagogue, and everybody walked past and said, Good Yom Tov to me, Happy New Year, and I wished it. And I noticed that during the prayers in the synagogue, there was one corner where there was some Jews, assumingly from the Middle East. They were dark complexion, and they did not go through to say Good Yom Tov to the rabbi. Well, I ate at the Reverend Bierman was the minister there, was a cousin. I ate at his place, Yom Tov, my food, and then when I asked him, sitting at a table, I asked him, why don't the Egyptian Jews? He repeated what the secretary told me, that there's tension, they feel they are being discriminated against. Most of the Jews in Adelaide are German, Hungarian, they don't get on with these. Leave it alone, he said to me. On the second day, Rosh Hashana, when the service finished, instead of me going down and standing myself at the entrance, I walked down from the pulpit where I was sitting, and I walked over to the corner where all the Egyptian Jews were, and I started shaking my Good Shabbos, Good Yom Tov. I was told that if looks could have killed, Mr. Gus Heinz looked at me from behind, I should have dropped dead. But unfortunately, looks don't kill, and nothing happened. I felt so good with myself that I had the courage to withstand the discrimination in the community, and they were absolutely, you can't imagine, they were elated that I should come over to them and wish them Good Yom Tov. They kissed my hand, the custom by them that they kissed their hand, they all kissed my hand, they were gathering around me and everything. I was embarrassed by my own courage. I was embarrassed. I didn't know what to say to them, so I just turned around out of innocence and I said, hey, by the way, do you know of an Egyptian girl that is blind? So one fellow says to me, yeah, I know them. I says, yeah, will you be seeing them during the week? He said, yes. He said, I said, would you do me a favor and tell her that the rabbi from here from Sydney wishes her a happy new year? He said, okay, he'll do that. But I was supposed to have gone back to Melbourne between the days between Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur, but I had made a good impression with my preaching, so that they asked me to stay behind, and they took me around and feted me and showed me the Adelaide and so on and so forth. I don't know why. To this day, I don't know why. But every night I went to bed, this girl played on my mind. This blind girl. And for some reason or other, she kept on coming back to my mind all the time. So much so that one day at dinner, I said to Mrs. Berman, I wonder, could you do me a favor? There are Egyptian Jews that know who this blind girl is. I wonder if you could get me the telephone. Oh, Rebbe, she says, you're treading on dangerous ground. There's tension in this community, please. I said, no, I must have it. I've got to satisfy myself. The fact was that she got me the telephone number. And after dinner, it was about 8 o'clock in the evening, I picked up the phone and I rang the number. A lady answered the phone, and I said, excuse me, my name is Rabbi Gutnik. Is there a blind girl living on that number? There was a pause, and then a bang on the telephone. I thought the line had gone dead. I picked it up again and rang again, and I asked if I said, it's Rabbi, I just was ringing, speaking to you, and she said, no, nobody lives here. And she hung up the phone. How could she say nobody lives here? She answered the telephone. This went on for about half an hour, and somehow or other I felt something was wrong. So I told Mrs. Berman, get me the address where these people live. I got the address, and I decided to visit them. It was already 10 o'clock at night when I took a taxi to visit. I remember in those days, it was a fortune. There was not dollars, it was pounds. And it cost me over £3 for traveling to the address of that woman. I came to the address, and the street, it was dark, but there was a light burning in the house. I knocked on the door, and I put my foot inside the door. And the lady opened the door, and I said, my name is Rabbi Gutnik, can I come in? And she tried to close the door on me, but my foot was there. And she saw she couldn't close the door, so she said, all right, come in. I walked in, and she took me into a lounge room. And I started talking to her. I wanted to get friendly with her first, with the mother that was, the lady of the house. And I asked her where she comes from. She told me from Alexandria. I just, by pure luck, happened to know the name of the Chaim, who was in Alexandria, the Rabbi in Alexandria. And I said, do you know this and this Rabbi? She said, yes, he married us. Why did you leave Egypt? Because at that time it was, who was the king? Before Nasser. Yeah, so some trouble there, and Jews were leaving there. Can I have a cup of tea? I said to her. I wasn't thirsty. I wanted to be friendly. She said to me, you'll drink a cup of tea in my house? I said, yes. She went out to the kitchen and came back with a cup of tea. I said, could I have something else? She said, yes, but would you like some cake? I said, no, I would like to meet your daughter. She paused, and then she said, all right. And she knocked on the door, and this girl came out, and I could notice as the girl came in that she was blind, but apparently she could see a silhouette because she knew where the lounge chair was, and she sat down in the lounge chair. I didn't say anything. I waited for a minute or two, and then the mother had the courtesy. She said, maybe you want to speak to her on your own. And she walked out into the kitchen, she closed the door, and she left me with the girl by herself. The girl must notice that the mother had left, and she crawled over from the chair and she put her arms around my legs and she started weeping. It's bad enough to see somebody blind, but to see them crying like that, it made... And she started kissing my shoes. And I thought this was a Sephardic custom. And I got hold of her. I said, what's your name? She said, Betty. I said, Betty, please don't do that. And I lifted her up, and she kept on holding on to me. I said, Betty, please, tell me what's the matter, what's wrong. And this is what she tells me. They came to Adelaide 2 years ago. Her father's a plain worker and doesn't earn very much, but he earned enough to make a living. She's been blind since she was a child. She had what was called a disease called trachoma, and that made her blind. There was no facilities for a blind girl to learn in Adelaide, but there was a Catholic school for blind children, and her parents put her into that Catholic school. She was very happy there. She learned well. But then she said, after about 12 months, there was a priest that used to come once a week to give them instructions, to pray with the girls and so forth. He started talking to me about the Virgin Mary, about Jesus, and so on and so forth. And at the beginning, she said, I thought he was just trying to teach me about his religion. But then a little while passed, and he started talking me into convert, change my religion. I don't know very much, he says, about religion, but I know I'm Jewish. I'm not going to give that up. So she resisted, and she told me, she admitted to me that she used to get nightmares, and at night she used to dream that the Virgin Mary was coming to her and telling her all sorts of things. But she kept on resisting. Until one day, the parents got a letter from the school telling them that unless they pay so much per week, they cannot afford, the school cannot afford to have her as a pupil anymore, and therefore they should make arrangements to take her out and take her somewhere else. Well, she was being blackmailed. She said, I was once sitting in my room and I had Mum and Dad talking. And Dad was talking to his mum. Mum was crying a little bit. And her father was saying to her, what can we do? What option have we got? We've got a daughter who's a cripple. That was the words that she heard her father say. We've got a daughter who's a cripple, who's handicapped. But what do we care? Let her convert. As long as she has her education, has a school. When I heard that, she said, my father talking like that, I burst out crying. She says, and I didn't know what to do. And I had decided, she said, I had heard that Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur was coming. I know there is such a Jewish holiday, and that everybody goes to synagogue. I decided, she said, to go to the synagogue and to pray to the God whom I've never seen and probably will never be able to see. To pray to him to send me a sign what I should do. On the eve of Rosh Hashanah, my father and mother went to work, my sister went to school, I claimed that I wasn't feeling well and I stayed home. After they left, I went to my next door neighbor, a non-Jewish lady, and asked her, could she do me a favor and take me to the synagogue? That was the lady that I had met in the foyer of the synagogue and who had brought me to pray. I asked, I didn't know what a synagogue looked like, he says. I asked for the holiest place to take me to the holiest place in the synagogue. She says, I was led there, I fell on my knees and prayed to the God that I cannot see to send me a sign what I should do. And I waited. She said, a couple of days ago, they had some visitors. And she went in to get a cup of tea. And the visitors were sitting with their parents in the kitchen. And this gentleman, Egyptian gentleman, turned around to her, Betty, what's this going on? The young handsome rabbi came from Sydney and the only one he asked about was about you. They were making a joke. When I heard that, she said, I rushed back into the bedroom and I burst out crying. I knew from heaven that that was a sign. You were going to tell me what to do. And now, Rabbi, she says, you are here in my home. Tell me, what should I do? During the tale of her story, my face was covered in tears. I assumed that the parents knew exactly what the girl was telling me. So I said to her, Betty, will you do what I tell you? She says, anything you tell me, I will do because God sent you. I said, all right, I'll fix it up. I opened the door to the kitchen, and as I opened the door, the mother fell on me and started crying. And the father was upset. What can we do? What can we do? What can we do? And she kept on saying, what can we do? I don't know, I had some money in my pocket. I took it out and I said, look, I'll get you more, but don't let your daughter convert. What can we do? It was already about 12 o'clock by then. And Mr. Lewis was one of the members of the board from the synagogue. He was the treasurer, and he was also in charge of welfare on Adelaide. I looked up his phone number in the book, and I rang him up at 12 o'clock at night. And I said to him, Mr. Lewis, I have a case here that needs your attention. You must come immediately. And these were his words, Rabbi, are you mad? I'm in my pajamas. I said, come in your pajamas. If you don't come here, you won't have a rabbi for Yom Kippur. This was 2 days before Yom Kippur. And to his credit, at about 20 to 12, he arrived at the address. I briefly told him what had happened. And he said to me, what should we do? I said, I want you to undertake on behalf of the Jewish community that you will pay for this girl's tuition until she finishes her schooling in this Catholic school, so that they don't use their free tuition as a means by which to force her to convert. He undertook it, and he kept it. I stayed for a few days till after Yom Kippur, and then went back to Sydney. In the meanwhile, I became a rabbi. After that story, I became a rabbi in Elwood Synagogue. The Adelaide community wanted me to become the rabbi, but it fell through because they wanted me to wear a dog's collar. You know, the ministerial, according to the Constitution. I wouldn't, and it fell through. And she used to write me letters. Her sister, her younger sister, used to write me letters that she dictated. And she used to address it to my dear father of my soul. One day I got a letter from her saying to me, the state government of South Australia had presented her with a blind dog. She was a brilliant student in that blind school. She passed with honors, and the state government gave her a dog. Would she mind if I called the dog Gutnik? And then Mr. Rich, he used to do business in Adelaide. He used to do business in Adelaide. One day he comes, he was a gab in my shul. He says, Rabbi, I don't understand. A dog called after you. I wrote away the story, I wrote away about this girl. I wrote away to Rabbi Chodakov, the secretary, main secretary of the Rebbe, and because the girl knew nothing about Judaism, and they organized in Braille all sorts of little booklets which they sent to her. And after she finished her schooling and she passed with honors, we decided to send her away to Israel. In Israel, in Jerusalem, there was a blind institute. And we got in touch with them, and I didn't, but Rabbi Chodakov got in touch with them in some way or other, and it was arranged that she should go there and become a teacher of other Jewish children. She went there, she was a teacher there for about 4 years. She eventually met a Sephardi man who was not blind, who married her. She now lives in Rehovot. She has 4 children. She's a grandmother. And I see her sometimes when I come to Israel. Many times the press and authors have asked me her name, and I asked her permission to use her name. She said no. She doesn't want to have publicity. She doesn't want. She feels a bit embarrassed and so forth. If you want to tell the story, you can tell the story, but please don't divulge my name. On the way that she went to Israel that Saturday, she was a guest in my home. And when she arrived in the synagogue that morning with my late wife, they sat upstairs, and I told the story, her story I told to the congregation. I'll never forget this. They all got up, and after I finished my sermon, clapped to her. You remember the letter the Rebbe wrote to me? I'm shocked to hear that the community needs your help and you don't come. And when you're there, interest yourself in the Egyptians. I believe that this was arranged in heaven. This girl's prayers and heartache was heard in heaven. And the only one of blessed memory that lived on this earth, that cared about a blind girl living 15,000 miles away, was a man by the name of Rabbi Shneur. May his memory be blessed. After that, I became a rabbi. And just thanks to this blind girl, you know what the Rebbe said to me? He said to me that she had her prayer answered from heaven. This is a sign from heaven to you too, that if you can make people who are blind, physically or spiritually blind, and you can make them see, then that is your destiny in life. And therefore, give up all your work, devote yourself to make blind people see. Highlight of the Rebbe Shneur.
Thank you.